Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really fascinating appellate court decision out of Sun City, Arizona. It's the case of Cropley versus the Recreation Centers of Sun-City. Now, at first glance, this might just look like a super dry legal dispute over neighborhood fees, right? But once you peel back the layers, it's actually this dramatic, decades-long legal battle over something you probably wouldn't expect: evaporated lake water. I mean, how do you even divide up the cost of water that literally vanishes into thin air? Well, we're going to break down exactly how the courts untangled all this neighborhood drama. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of the homeowners for a second. Picture this. You're living in a peaceful community, you're enjoying your lakefront views, you've been perfectly happy, totally comfortable with your neighborhood assessments for years. Then, you open your mail one day in late 2008. You're expecting the usual routine invoice, but instead you pull out a demand that just completely catches you off guard. Ask yourself, what would you do if your bill tripled literally overnight without any warning? To really understand their shock, we gotta look at the baseline here. For years, these 81 single-family lakefront homeowners had been paying a highly predictable, entirely manageable annual fee to maintain the lake. In 2008, that fee was sitting at exactly $302.10. It was a known quantity. Sure, it adjusted slowly over time, but it was just a standard, boring part of living on Viewpoint Lake. But suddenly, that peace was totally shattered. The homeowners get this brand new notice stating their fee was skyrocketing from that manageable $300 to an astonishing $1,032.25. Breaking a nearly 30-year peace in the neighborhood, this massive overnight hike immediately set off alarm bells. Everyone's wondering why the sudden drastic increase. Well, the answer lies with the Recreation Centers of Sun-City. They were the corporate nonprofit entity that actually owned the lake itself, plus the nearby golf courses that were pulling water from that lake. In 2008, the Recreation Center's president looked at the books and determined they simply weren't collecting enough cash to cover the rising costs of lake maintenance. So, faced with a deficit, they didn't just tweak the numbers, they shifted the entire foundation of how those bills were calculated. It all boiled down to a massive change in the math. The old billing method was this steady, predictable system where the base fee just bumped up annually based purely on the consumer price index. Basic inflation, right? But the new proposed method tossed the inflation index out the window entirely. Instead, they decided to base the fee strictly on the linear feet of a property's lakeshore. This structural pivot is exactly what caused those bills to more than triple for the everyday homeowners, completely shifting the financial burden onto them. Unsurprisingly, the homeowners were absolutely furious. They pushed back hard and eventually filed a class action lawsuit. But here's the thing. The courts couldn't just look at what happened in 2008 to decide who was right. To truly get to the bottom of this mystery and figure out which billing method was legally binding, we actually have to act like investigators and trace this super messy trail of contracts, declarations, and agreements all the way back to the very origin of the lake itself. Yeah, the seeds of this dispute were planted way earlier. It kicks off with the original 1969 Developer Declaration, which first set the ground rules for the land. From there, we jump to a 1975 property transfer, when the recreation centers actually bought the lake and the golf courses. And finally, that builds up to this pivotal 1979 showdown between the homeowners and the recreation centers that was supposedly going to settle the whole matter once and for all. So, what was the original deal? The 1969 document pretty clearly stated that lakefront property owners had to pay the actual cost of the electricity used to pump well water. Why? To replace all the water constantly being lost to evaporation and seepage. But here is the massive flaw. It never clarified exactly how those costs should be divided up among the 81 single-family lots, the recreation center, and the nearby condominiums. The rule was there, sure, but the math just wasn't. By the late 1970s, this ambiguity caused a huge dispute. The recreation centers were even threatening to slap liens on properties if homeowners didn't pay their demanded shares. So, as you can imagine, the tension was incredibly high. But then, at an April 1979 board meeting, after years of fighting over exact percentages and who owed what, Recreation Centers President James Wormsley steps in. The Homeowners Association president proposes a flat fee adjusted by a cost index, and Wormsley just casually replies, "How about $95? It is honestly wild to think that this massive, highly complicated dispute was seemingly resolved by such an informal, off-the-cuff question. But that simple offer literally became the foundation for a permanent peace treaty. The compromise they struck was incredibly elegant. First, a base assessment fee was set at just $95 per residential lot for the year 1979. Second, to protect against inflation, they'd increase that fee annually based exclusively on the Consumer Price Index. And finally, the recreation centers agreed they would cover all the remaining lake maintenance and electricity costs. It was a clean, fair formula. It settled the dispute, and everyone just happily followed it for almost 3 decades. Okay, so fast forward back to 2008. The recreation centers want more money, so they go looking for a loophole, and they find a pretty big one. They realize that the 1979 peace treaty, even though it was signed by the presidents of the respective associations, was never officially recorded as an amendment to the 1969 declaration. On top of that, it wasn't passed by a majority vote of all the property owners, which the original rules seemed to require. Because of this technicality, the recreation centers boldly went to court and argued, hey, that 1979 agreement is completely null and void. This brings us to the real crux of the appellate court's decision, and it hinges heavily on this fundamental, honestly super powerful contract principle known as waiver. By legal definition, a waiver is the intentional relinquishment of a known right. But crucially, and this is what the court zeroed in on, waiver can happen simply through a persistent failure to object to a practice over a long period of time. Basically, if you know a rule is being bent and you don't say anything for years, you might just waive your right to ever complain about it down the road. Applying this principle, the court firmly ruled against the recreation centers. The judges essentially said, look, after you knowingly collected payments based on this consumer price index formula for nearly 30 years, you can't just suddenly claim the whole agreement is invalid today because it no longer suits your financial goals. You can't have it both ways. Their decades of silence and active participation acted as a legally binding waiver against challenging it now. But wait, there is a totally fascinating subplot to this whole ordeal. While this main heavyweight bout was raging between the single-family homeowners and the recreation centers, a neighboring property, the Dorado Condominiums Homeowners Association, saw an opening. They figured they'd use the chaos of the lawsuit to find their own legal loophole, hoping they could just sneak out of paying for lake maintenance entirely. Dorado's argument went like this. They claimed they were exempt because the original 1969 declaration supposedly required a subsequent filing to officially burden their specific tract of land. And since that extra paperwork never happened, they argued they shouldn't have to pay a dime. But the court swiftly shut this down. They pointed out that Dorado's land is explicitly contiguous, meaning directly adjacent to the lake. And the 1969 declaration clearly stated it automatically burdened all adjacent property. Anyone tracing the ownership records would easily see that their property was always legally bound to the lake's upkeep. Nice try, but no dice. So how does all this dust finally settle? Ultimately, the appellate court affirmed the lower court's rulings across the board. The 1979 agreement, even though it lacked formal recording, stands. It remains completely legally binding because of decades of waiver. The recreation centers are forced to stick to the original consumer price index formula, meaning the homeowners' fees go right back to their normal, predictable rate. And finally, Dorado remains fully bound by the original 1969 declaration, a pretty massive win for the everyday homeowners. This case is just so much more than a dispute over evaporated water, you know? It's a real testament to the fact that how we behave over time carries immense legal weight. It leaves us with this fascinating reminder about the lasting power of historical precedent and everyday practices, which really makes you wonder, are there forgotten, unrecorded handshake agreements quietly binding your own community right now? Could a casual compromise made by your neighbors 30 years ago actually hold up in a court of law today? It's absolutely something to think about the next time you pay your neighborhood fees. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the rules around you.